Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, and I hope you're doing well today. I have here a movie review of a film from 2003. It was directed by John Murkowski, and the story was also by him. It was written by a different person, but I don't remember the name, so I'm not going to mention it here. And the film in question is Black Cadillac. Now, I never heard about this movie whatsoever. I was scrolling through Tubi one day, bored, and I was in the mood for a thriller horror movie, and I saw this come up, and I was like, okay, it has Randy Quaid in it. It looks like a potential killer car movie, so I was like, you know what, I'll try this out. And boy, was I surprised, because I thought this movie ruled. For a horror drama, it's not quite a thriller, but it kind of is. It has a lot of action scenes in it. I was kind of blown away by the quality of this film, given that the director made movies like Richie Rich's Christmas Wish and Santa with Muscles. I know recently he made a movie a few years back called Assimilate, and I think he did one of the Amityville horror sequels. So John Murkowski doesn't have the most grandiose filmography. He's done a lot of Hallmark movies, I think a few Lifetime movies as well. So I didn't have high expectations going into it, but like I said, I was really shocked by how much I loved this film. Yes, I loved a little straight-to-video movie from 2003, and I think this film was released under the brandage of, I want to say, First Look Entertainment, who is known for making some really bad movies from the early 2000s. I've watched one, I think it was Pinata Survival Island. I've heard about the Mosquito Man, or whatever it's called, Mansquito. I've heard of how bad those movies can be. And like I said, of all the things going against this movie, it works so well as a horror drama. I have never seen a horror drama, maybe outside of David Cronenberg's The Fly, that I was this engrossed into while watching it. It's just something to marvel at, really. If you're a fan of low budget movies, if you're a fan of hidden gems out there in the horror realm, I should say, go check this movie out. There's so many genres at work in this film, it's hard to kind of pinpoint what exactly this movie is. But I think there's something in this film for everyone, whether you like character-driven narratives, whether you like slice-of-life stuff in movies, whether you like the winter atmosphere, if you like car movies or action movies, if you like dramas. This has everything in it. And it also strangely feels like an adult interpretation of a Goosebumps type story. But, of course, made for adults. It's really weird to describe, but yeah, check this movie out, y'all. This is one of the true hidden gems that I've come across from straight-to-video horror, I should say. So with that out the way, let's get into a brief plot synopsis without giving too much away, because I don't want to spoil the entire movie for you. But nonetheless, the movie's about these three kids. I think they're seniors in high school or maybe freshmen in college. There's a guy from Yale University, or at least he's going to Yale. He has a good friend who is kind of scarred on his face, but he looks like a punk rocker, and he's going to, I think, work on an oil rig soon after this night is over. And the guy from Yale's younger brother are out in Wisconsin one night. They're all from Michigan, but they made the pilgrimage to Wisconsin for a fake ID ritual. And they're at this dive bar in the middle of the night when it's snowing outside. And they're all kind of getting into their own troubles with different women. The Yale guy is sleeping with a girl in his car. The guy with the scar on his face is hitting on a girl at the bar. And the younger brother is getting his freak on with a much older woman in the back room of the bar. Well, there comes a ruckus that starts and erupts inside of the bar, and a brawl breaks out, and all the guys get into a fist fight, and they end up peeling out of there in their car, leaving behind the scene, and they want to drive back to Michigan because they've had a wild night, and they just want to quits before the weather gets too bad, and now they got potentially people on their trail. Well, once they leave the bar, things start to get really weird for them as they're on the road. They are being followed by this black car. And the car is essentially like a 1950s black Cadillac. You might recognize the car. It looks like the car from The Godfather. That's what I kept thinking when I was watching it. But the car is about as black as night, and the car seems to be kind of trailing them, and then the boys let them peel off, and they're talking to themselves, and before they know it, they pretty much get stopped by this police officer up the road. And the police officer is played by Randy Quaid, who you might know from the vacation movies from National Lampoon. He played Cousin Eddie. And he's having some car trouble and needs a ride back to his house. He wants to get home to his wife. But once the boys pick up the cop, they start interacting with the black Cadillac again, who appears to be wanting to street race them now. And the cop is essentially telling them, okay, we'll street race them, see what happens. And the Yale guy who's driving the car essentially tries to race him and gets a close call, but ends up ditching the black Cadillac. And while they're kind of marveling in what they just did, they make it a little up the road. And now the black Cadillac is up the road again. And this time, instead of wanting to street race, it seems like they're trying to attack the people in the car. And this makes the situation a lot more tense. The cop's like, okay, what did you do to piss off this black Cadillac or the people in it? And the kids are like, we don't know, but we are tired of it, and we're trying to get home after we drop you off, so they need to just leave us alone or things are going to get really hostile. And as the movie goes along, as they're driving throughout the night, I've kind of skimmed over some small scenes, but you get a really deep sense of how these characters interact with each other, and you get a good glimpse into their relationships and into the past a little bit. And there's a fun little scene where once the boys are trying to peel away from the black Cadillac, at one point they end up on a on a sheet of ice, and the younger guy has to pee while on the ice, and after they just were speeding down it, and the ice almost cracks and they peel away again. And then of course the black Cadillac might be watching over on the side, creating this level of intrigue of like, what exactly does this Cadillac want with these kids? Well, getting back to the point of the black Cadillac is now trying to attack them. Let's just say something happens to the cop in like the middle portion of the movie, and once the cop is kind of taken briefly out of the story, I should say, the boys realize the situation is getting way too dire and way too serious, and it becomes apparent that their car is damaged, and they can only go for so long without actually handling the Cadillac, because it seems like the Cadillac's just going to keep following them where they're going. So pretty much as the movie will allude to, they have a bunch of close calls with this black Cadillac. They end up getting some car trouble. They have to pull over in a small town and kind of work on the car, but there might be something that happens to one of the characters there, and the remaining people have to kind of trudge their broken car and risk destroying it and completely ruining it to save their friend or whatever. And this builds up to the climax of the story, where there's a huge plot reveal about what's behind the black Cadillac, or who is behind it, what are the motives, and how that ties into previous events of the story. And then once the climax is over, we get to see the aftermath of the climax and what that means for the characters moving forward. So that in a nutshell is what you're going to expect out of Black Cadillac. But it's also underselling the tremendous character interactions and backstory that we get with these kids in the story, and how that kind of plays into the context of the night as a whole for the story. I should say this up front. This movie is pretty much a tantamount on friendship and one last hurrah before you go your separate ways. That's the prevailing theme that you see in this film, where you have these two best friends and one of the friends' younger brother are all just trying to have a night of fun, and that fun goes south very quickly, and all the decisions they made just to have fun have some consequences, and because they're so young, they might not think of those consequences, but it may come back to bite them in the ass. And it's a good cautionary tale in the heart of it as well, because when you're out in a place that you don't live and you're unfamiliar, you should really be more careful and not be so reckless. And that's kind of the moral of the story, because sometimes you can get really hurt, and sometimes you can be put in some danger. And ironically, this movie has no gore, no killing, and none of that. It's just a straight up thriller mixed with that drama and horror element of the unknown about the black Cadillac. And there's something about it that just registers, and you click with it from the get-go, and you know what it's trying to do. And it's helped by the passion put into this movie. I watched the making of documentary because I was so curious after watching this, perhaps if there's any information out there. And luckily on YouTube, somebody was kind enough to upload the behind the scenes making of this movie. And hearing the stories about what the filmmakers did to pull this movie off blew my mind, because you could have fooled me. I thought that this movie legit looked like they put some spotlights out in a legitimate road out there in Michigan or Wisconsin or whatever and filmed it at night and did a lot of these chase sequences at night, which they surprisingly did. There's so many great car scenes in this movie of just speeding down a road, shifting the accelerator, gunning it, running away, getting into car chases. It is a thrilling movie. And that's not the only thing thrilling about it. I mean, you're glued to the screen from how well these characters are acted and how well the characters are delivered in terms of the plot and the storyline. It's just so magical what they're able to pull off with this low of a budget. Because once you look at or if you have a chance to watch the making of this film, they were filming this stuff in their backyard with fake snow at times. They had chopped up a car to make it look like all the actors were in it, and they had to project the live footage they shot on these dark roads out there in Michigan or Wisconsin or whatever with real snow to kind of match it up. And you could have fooled me because it looked incredible. For a movie with that low of a budget, I was kind of shocked by how well it registered. Getting down into like the core the core of the movie, I've already talked about the story a little bit, but I think the story here is just so easy to digest, and it's just so powerful in its delivery. While some people might look at this movie and be like, you know what, there might be some better car movies in this. If you're coming into this movie looking for car chase sequences and the thrills, there's movies like Duel and Christine and other killer car movies that probably do this better. Even Joyride, the original first movie from the early 2000s, which I think this movie admittedly, I guess, was trying to buy off the hype of that movie, because Joyride was a big success when it came out and it spawned a few sequels. But I have to say, I was taken aback by the story itself, and I think the story of this movie perhaps is even better than something like a Joyride, because you get so many character moments here, and you get such a fleshed out friendship and siblingship with these three teenage kids that you feel like by the end of the film that you really got to know them. And the dialogue feels so organic in this movie. I don't know what it is about low-budget movies, but I've come across quite a few recently. There's another film that I want to review very soon. I haven't finished watching it yet. It's called Deer Camp 86. There's similar organic chemistry going on there. I just watched a movie called Haunt Season not too long ago. Right before I made this review, actually. And that had organic dialogue. This movie delivers the organic, everyday person feel with how it carries, character interactions, and it's just very well done. The lighting and the look of the movie, it is low budget from the early 2000s, so it's not as crisp as a low budget movie can be these days. But for back then standards, I was shocked. They really made use of the darkness of Wisconsin at night and the snow. It just looks so believable and passable on that front. It's so competently made. And it just sucks you in because as they're driving on this dark road at night, you never know where this pitch black Cadillac is going to peer out with its headlights. And every time it appears, this story ramps up the stakes a little bit in the thrill department. And it's one of those movies that just escalate very well. And it knows what it's doing. It's just so competently made. I have nothing but praise about it. Really, I have no real objective negatives with this movie. Even down to the goosebumpsy twist near the end, while it might be kind of predictable and you might be able to see the direction pretty early on, if you're good at, solving, whodunits and mysteries and all that, which this film admittedly has some notes of, despite it being predictable, it's still really fun and it's exhilarating because these teens have a lot riding on their future and making out the night alive. And one character in particular gets a horrific injury as a result, and it might impact their collegiate future. But hey, might be mildly giving away what character that is if you've been listening, but still, I mean, you get the sense of the stakes there, and even how the situation is resolved is really fun and over the top, which I think adds a lot of charm to that as well. I don't really have much objective flaws with this film whatsoever, other than a few small things. Now, when it comes to the music and the sound effects of this movie, that's where it starts to kind of show how cheap it is. I'm going to be honest. Some of the sound effects in here are played a lot. Like there's like a hawk sound that gets played at least over a dozen times in the movie, and it's so out of place when it is played. Especially when the characters are going through their turmoil scenes where they're arguing with each other and kind of disagreeing on the situation and what to do next, and them getting in fights and arguments and getting more hostile with each other as the night progresses and as they're taking their stress out on each other. There's some sound effects like animal noises and stuff like that just feel kind of repetitive and annoying. The music does feel cheap at times. Going back to the sound effects as well, there's some sound effects and some cues that I swear I heard in the 90s Goosebumps television show. Especially when you get near the climax. When I heard that, I was like, wait. And I rewinded it, and I played it again, and I did it about 10 more times just to confirm. And I was like, yep, I've heard this sound effect in the 90s Goosebumps television show. So they tried their best when it came to the sound and all of that, but it did look kind of cheap. At least from the outside looking in, hearing it, you know what I mean? It's not the most pleasant thing ever at times. Getting back to some more mild, smaller things, the movie is mainly spent inside of this car. And there are some scenes, and I'm specifically getting at the scenes with Randy Quaid when he's in the film, or when he's first introduced, I should say. His acting is so weird in this movie. I don't know if it's because he's on a drinking binge or he's not really feeling the film or whatever, but the way he acts is just so bizarre. And I don't know why it registers as a negative to me. I don't know if I like his performance for a good portion of the film here, but he does get a little bit better by the end, and I can kind of appreciate it a bit better. But I don't know, maybe he's not the best fit for the role he was given here, but it's kind of fun seeing him in something that I don't normally see him as, and that means in like a semi-serious role. So take that for what you will, Randy Quaid fans out there. But yeah, that's just how I feel there. And then one last small nitpick about the film. Honestly, the film does I feel like it kind of promises something early on about this. Is it supernatural? Is it grounded in realism? And while I like the direction it went in that more realism approach, I just don't feel like the film spent enough focus on the hypothetical alternative of the supernatural. Because at first, I think the guys are alluded to thinking about the Cadillac and the lens of, is this thing actually like following us, or are we kind of imagining this? And then like, nope, it's real. It's come back. Blah 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 blah. And I feel like the movie probably could have taken a more interesting direction if it played on the supernatural aspect a little bit more, or at least the idea of the characters thinking it's supernatural, because I think that would have helped the twist out a little bit if it's grounded in realism, and help, especially the audience come to that, reveal as something a little more shocking. And because they didn't spend focus on that, it makes the reveal, going back to it being predictable, that is kind of tied with this a little bit. You saw the twist coming from a mile away. Like I said, especially if you're well-versed in whodunit movies, you can sniff this stuff out really quickly. But nonetheless, with those negatives aside, I really love this film. I want to buy this film for my personal collection. I don't know if there's a Blu-ray out there. If I have to get a DVD copy, I will, or maybe even a VHS. Whatever I can get my hands on. I want this movie in my collection because this is one of those hidden gem movies. And I've seen a bunch of car movies. I've seen Steven Spielberg's Duel. I can say wholeheartedly, while Steven Spielberg's Duel is a bit more thrilling and it's played up in that traditional thriller format, I think I prefer this over that movie. I think I prefer this over Joyride. A good amount of car movies I prefer this over, just for, I guess, the setting and the characters. Joyride comes close sometimes with the characters. It's more mainline. It has Paul Walker and Steve Zahn. I could probably review that movie one day, maybe that whole franchise if y'all wanted to, because I have a lot of fond memories watching those films. But this movie, it has stuck with me since I've saw it. And I saw this, a little bit before I made this review, but I just can't stop thinking about this movie. And I don't know if maybe it's because I'm a Goosebumps fan. If you can't tell, I collect Goosebumps. It feels like Goosebumps for adults. I don't know. But it's just a fun movie. And I can see myself watching this multiple times throughout the year. And this is one of the most criminally underrated straight-to-video movies I have ever seen. And you guys need to go check it out. It's probably not going to be for everyone out there, especially you rabid horror fans that are looking for deaths and gore and all this stuff in horror films. This is a different type of horror. This is more of a thriller, drama, horror put together, maybe with a little bit of mystery. If you like genre-bending stuff, try this out. I think you won't be disappointed. I'd probably give this movie a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I love it. I've never, seen anybody really bash this movie on the internet since I watched it and I started looking out for opinions on it. I don't see anybody bashing this movie. A lot of people seem to think, at the very least, it's a decent movie, which says a lot. And from the guy who made Richie Rich's Christmas Wish, of all people, hey, broken clocks twice. A broken clock is right twice a day, right? So there you go. And I haven't seen that other movie he made called Assimilate, but I might go check it out after this. It has some recognizable faces I noticed in there. It's his other foray into horror. I don't know about the Amityville Horror sequel, but we'll get there when we get there, I guess. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Black Cadillac. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie before as well. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.